Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. I'm Cynthia Fuller. My guest today is Charlotte Dennett. Charlotte lives in Vermont. Charlotte ran for office for the Attorney General, right?
Yeah,
And Charlotte is a lawyer, and she's an author besides. So before we get into the conversation about the Middle East, tell us a little bit about your candidacy and why you ran.
I ran in 2010
Okay.
when people really wanted to impeach Bush. They wanted to do that because of the illegal war in Iraq. And
2010, he was no longer president.
that's true, but it didn't
Okay.
matter.
Okay.
I mean, wait a minute, hold it. 2000, my book came out in 2010. I apologize. It was
Okay.
2008.
Okay.
It was during the last months of his presidency, and
Okay.
Vermonters were very much against the war. They even had down in Brattleboro, they threatened to do a citizen's arrest if he crossed into
Wow.
Vermont, and so there was this huge following of wanting to hold him accountable for the war. And it used to be on impeachment, but then the Democratic Party nixed that idea. So then people started thinking about prosecuting Bush. And I ended up going to a big seminar at the Massachusetts School of Law that was devoted entirely to how are you going to prosecute Bush. And one of the people that showed up there was Vincent Bugliosi, who was a famous criminal defense attorney and also the author of the famous book Helter Skelter about the
Mhm.
Manson killings. He's become a very controversial figure since then, but I won't go into it probably. But he was real in wanting to hold Bush accountable, so he wrote this really outrageously titled book called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. And in the book, he said any state's attorney or any attorney general can prosecute Bush in their own state because he had developed a legal theory about how he could do it, even though Bush was not in the state when troops were sent off to war. And I analyzed all of his arguments. I thought they were pretty valid, and it was worth giving a try. And it was a quixotic race. I mean, we got started in September before the
Wow.
November elections. But again, I thought that because of the sentiment in Vermont, if we could just get the word out, who knows what would happen. And Bugliosi came with me and was with me when we had our press conference. Huge media attention, and then silence.
Mm.
Media decided this was not really worth pursuing. So obviously we lost. And many people came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, if I only know you're running." But of course, the word did not get out sufficiently. And but I wrote a book about it. I wrote a book called "The People versus Bush: One Lawyer's Campaign to Bring the President to Justice." And in that, I describe all the background to how he used legal maneuvers to get us into the war. You may remember the names Yu and Bybee. These were two attorneys that were in the Office of Legal Counsel in the Justice Department, and they concocted these fake laws to justify how to get into Iraq. Okay, so I wrote about that, and I wrote about my campaign. It's a fun book. I think I've heard great feedback, but it didn't go anywhere because the campaign couldn't couldn't be widely spread.
Is it
Even though I
still
got support from all over the country.
is it still available? Can
Yeah,
people
yeah,
still
you
get
can
it?
get it on Amazon. It's still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Great.
So then
So,
I ended up um writing another book called Follow the Pipelines,
right.
which is this
Lead
book.
to our discussion today. Since
And that, yeah, go ahead.
since we spoke, we spoke before this past weekend, and I think that the dynamics have changed quite a bit. So, what's your overall view of what this situation is right now?
Where?
Wha-
Where?
In the
The
middle,
Middle East?
yeah,
Gaza? Iran? Which?
Iran,
Well,
Iran.
actually, this is supposed to be about Netanyahu's endgame, but I'll tell you that Iran is part of it.
Oh, of
Yeah,
course he is.
yeah, yeah. So what's happening now? I agree with some of the analysis that his bombing Iran was a distraction from what was happening in Gaza, which is incredibly tragic. And he you know, when you're a wartime president, people tend to rally around you. And that's exactly what happened in Israel. People who were disgruntled that he wasn't getting the hostages back. There was a group who of Israelis who were very much against what he was doing in Gaza. And of course, we all know that his Gaza war was to keep him in office, prevent him from going to jail. It's like,
Right.
you know, you have an agreement between two maniacs, both of them megalomaniacs, Trump and Netanyahu, and they both want to stay out of jail. So what do? They kill a lot of people and they don't care. So at any rate, it's all tied in. In fact, I was reading one New York Times article today, actually, and I thought it was quite right that he's gained more favor now because of the brilliant tactical bombing of these different nuclear sites, and they think it's bought him time. I mean, bought him long. What am I saying? It has bought him time.
Uh-huh.
He thinks they think some of his advisors think maybe he'd have more flexibility now to deal with Gaza and bring about a ceasefire and bring the hostages home because he's more popular. You know, he's really worried in the past that his days were numbered, and now he's on a big wave of popularity. But actually, well, it may not last that long because we still don't know exactly what damage was done to those nuclear sites or whether the area where the centrifuges were creating enriched uranium might have been moved. So with all Trump's big brouhaha about obliterating Iran's nuclear sites, we're still waiting to see. You know, everybody's waiting. We don't really know. And so it's questionable how far Netanyahu can ride high on this wartime victory. But yeah, go ahead.
When did you first hear about it Sunday morning or Saturday evening?
I heard about it Saturday evening. Yeah.
Okay, what was your first reaction?
Oh my God. That was my reaction.
Oh boy.
Oh no. Oh no. I
Uh-huh.
mean, getting involved in anything nuclear in the Middle East, hello?
Right.
I mean, because first of all, he's got the attitude of complete impunity. And I don't think he cares really terribly about saving the hostages or how many Israelis are going to die, you know. So there's that aspect of it. And
Uh-huh.
then there's Trump also who really only looks at things as transactional and is stupid.
Mm.
He has no understanding of the whole history of the region, which is and he's got people around him who now are just yes people. They have no experience or very little experience in diplomacy. So they don't know all the sensitivities and the vagaries and the sentiments and the feelings of people in that part of the world. And my estimate is, first of all, with regard to Iran, the Iranians are a very proud people. Uh, Going back to their wonderful history, back to the Persian Empire. And they also have a long memory about the overthrow of their Prime Minister Mossadegh in 1953 by the CIA. Mossadegh had nationalized the oil industry. Well, that was a no-no for as far as the West was concerned. So the British and the Americans conspired to overthrow him. That's never been forgotten. Never. And then there was the whole hostage taking event in 1979. People have to remember that relations between the Shah of it, who was the ruler then, and America was solid. He was a secular tyrant and very much supported by Rockefeller interests. He put all of Iran's money into Chase Manhattan Bank in London, for instance.
Wow.
When the revolution, when the people took hostages, if you remember that, 400 hostages
Yeah.
taken, um, the first thing that happened that the U.S. did was to freeze any money in the Chase Manhattan Bank because the man who emerged victorious, Khomeini, threatened to withdraw all those funds that the Shah had put into the Chase Bank. I could go
Wow.
on and on. It was a setup. It was a setup to protect the money in the bank. It took over 400 days to get the hostages out.
Mhm.
And I was in communication with one of the family members, a top level diplomat that was being held hostage in Iran. And he sent a message, watch out for Kissinger and Helms, Kissinger, Rockefeller, and Helms. That was his message. In
Wow.
other words, these guys all manipulated this crisis. And well, the long story short is while the hostages were there, um, the Shah became ill and eventually wanted to go to the United States for treatment of cancer. And the people in Tehran warned the U.S. that if you let the Shah in, then we'll take over the embassy. The warning was there. They let the Shah in. The people took over the embassy, and then the all that money stayed in Chase National Bank. Anyway, there's more to it, but I can't recall how much of it I wrote in both my books. But the point is that the Shah was hated, and I went there twice. All I could see were Secret Service people hanging around at every street corner. It was horrible. So these poor Iranian people, they've suffered under Shah. They've suffered under this mullahs, the really conservative Islamic rulers. The one thing that has the street in support of the mullahs is they're the only guys that took on Israel and what it was doing in Gaza and Lebanon and Syria. So Netanyahu's endgame has been to get rid of uh, the current regime. You hear them talking about regime change. He very much wants that. But who knows who's going to replace it and whether it's going to be any better for Israel. Because, as I say, there's the street, they're Muslims, they have no love for Israel. So I don't know I really don't know what the outcome of this, even if you put a moderate in there. And but that's the dream. And let's not forget that going after Iran was first envisioned in 2001, right after the 9/11, when the General Wesley Clark, and I'm looking at my book right now, he was a retired NATO commander, stated that he was approached by a Pentagon guy right after 9/11 who told him that the Pentagon's plans were, quote, to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. And what were those countries? Starting with Iraq, moving on to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. All of those countries are failing now, failed states essentially. So, and what is this all about? That's when I get into the story of oil and pipelines and follow the pipelines. So if you want,
Up.
yeah, go ahead.
Hold your book up.
Yeah, I did before, didn't I? Follow the pipelines. That's it.
Okay.
12 maps. Maps are like pictures. They tell they're worth 1,000 words. And there is a map. Ah, yes. Now here's the map, the most recent map that I've been looking at, and it is a map of a speech of Netanyahu that he gave at the UN. I think it was in the 2004 session. He loves visual aids. He's always putting up maps. All right, here's the one that's really interesting. So he's got two different versions of that region of the Middle East. Here's the map. And if you Google Netanyahu at UN showing maps, the blessing and the curse. So let me describe.
Okay.
The curse is that axis of evil, and it involves Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And the blessing, which is this other map, it shows a red line. I'll describe that red line in a minute. And what he said is that it shows, get this, rail lines, energy pipelines, and fiber optic cables sweeping across the Saudi land bridge and connecting India with the Mediterranean Sea. Now, what is this? This is a project called IMEC, India Middle East. What was the C standing? Corridor.
Okay.
And the whole look. This is the real end game. Netanyahu wants to be the big power in the region. He's already claiming that's what he is. And he wants to create an energy corridor up the coast of the Eastern Mediterranean, not just Gaza, but going further north into Syria and into Lebanon first, and then into Syria. And the whole idea is they're going to feed oil and natural gas that has been found in great quantities off the coast of Israel and Gaza and Lebanon, $500 billion worth. And he wants to ship it all up to Europe, which desperately needs it because of the war in Ukraine. Because now they're no longer getting cheap Russian oil and natural gas. They used to get it through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They were going to get more of it, and of course, that was sabotaged. Meanwhile, people may wonder, why has the West been so quiet? Why did Biden allow constant military shipments to Netanyahu when he knew it was supporting the genocide of Gaza? And why would Biden want his legacy to be known as Genocide Joe? Why would they do that? And the reason is they all had stakes in it. They all thought that they could solve the problem with big energy deals and others. Trump had his dream of the Riviera in Gaza, vast, or as Kushner, his son-in-law, said, there'll be vast waterfront development.
Mm-hmm.
But what that required is peace, no conflict. And here was Hamas. And so the solution, as the Israelis put it very, very succinctly, wiping out Gaza, destroying it, demilitarizing it, throwing the people out of the lands. And then they've got their happiness and they've got their huge profits also in oil and natural gas, distributing it to Europe. My husband and I wrote a book on Rockefeller too. That's when we learned the founder of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller, was known as the king of pipeliners. He learned domestically first that the big money to be made was in the distribution of the energy, not necessarily grabbing that energy and controlling it in the ground. And if the oil isn't distributed, it serves no function. It's got to go to markets. So that was one way I got onto the whole pipeline story in the Middle East. The other way, and I've been on your show describing how my father was the first master spy in the Middle East, working for the Central Intelligence Group right before his death. which was the immediate predecessor of the CIA. And his last mission was the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, which was going to connect Saudi oil to the Mediterranean. And after his death by a mysterious plane crash, and after a coup that overthrew the then president of Syria because he didn't want that pipeline to terminate in Israel. Anyway, it finally was built, and from the early 50s until the Lebanese civil war in the 80s, that was supplying massive amounts of oil going to Europe. And it saved the Marshall Plan. It was very crucial to the whole market plan. It turned the United States into a superpower. And Saudi Arabia to this day has been very much protected by the US, as has Israel. And when my father wrote this incredible document, which I got declassified because I sued the CIA, and it said it was his marching orders when he went over in 1943 to Lebanon. And it said, the oil of Saudi Arabia is so important, it must be protected at all costs. So I started to think about that. And it's a meme that's been considered all the way up to the present. Why must it be protected at all costs? I'm going on. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, I do. All of the stuff that you're saying, does anybody hear this stuff on the mainstream, either the mainstream media or the alternative media, meaning like YouTube and stuff?
I'm sad to say very little. I will be speaking in Nevada next month. Veterans Peace for Peace have invited me to talk on a conference about militarism and climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had a discussion ahead of time with one of the organizers of this, and we both agreed that you've got these interest groups that are funneled. People who care about the climate and know oil is responsible can't seem to figure out that it's also behind the endless wars.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start to connect the two, then you see how powerful the oil companies are. They have huge influence over Congress, right? They're lobbyists and so on. So you never hear an oil explanation for what's going on in all these endless wars. I mean, even now that we're in a Middle East crisis, they have to talk about oil with regard to Iran because everyone's scared that the Iranians are going to close the Strait of Hormuz, that
Mm-hmm.
tiny little strip where tankers go and take the oil through that little strip and then distribute it, around the world. All right, so now people are seeing that link. But I mean, even progressive groups have been reluctant to take on this analysis. And it kind of amazes me, to tell you the truth, which
So,
is why I'm grateful for you to having me on. I mean, I've been on a lot of podcasts, all right, but breaking through to mainstream media, very difficult, and
so
even
that's
some progressive groups.
so that's the reason I created Focus on the Candidates. I'm working towards identifying past and present candidates, offer them a forum on this YouTube channel because a lot of them, like yourself, have a lot to say that's not covered in the media. And
Yeah.
by getting people who are are interested in spreading the word, but they don't have a forum. This is the forum, and hopefully we can change the dialogue.
Well, not only change the dialogue, change the facts on the ground.
Right.
I mean, trying to set up a third party, very difficult.
Mhm.
And which is actually what's needed, a third party that's not beholden to corporate power, for instance, or to oil companies or to big pharma. You know, it's
But
going to
but
take.
I'm sorry. My feeling is okay. I know that the Republicans and Democrats, they're just falling apart at this point. And a third party, without identifying the problems with the Democrats, with the Republicans, if another party was formed without identifying the problems of the other two parties, can a third party be successful?
Well, that's the whole question. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work. You know, Bernie Sanders, where from Vermont, where I live,
Mm,
Burlington, Vermont. In fact, we moved up to Vermont to check out this guy who was the mayor of Burlington at the time. And like, we were very curious. How could this socialist get elected mayor? And we were even going to do a documentary on it.
mhm,
But no one was interested at the time. No one. Well, he wasn't a big time at that point.
mhm.
And he initially was all in favor of a third party and advocated for it. But he ran for governor and he lost. He lost to a woman governor. Then I think he concluded that he was not going to be able to just function on a local level. He had to go throughout the country. And the he nixed. We got very close to actually forming a third party. Ralph Nader came in and some other bigwigs, and and he suddenly killed it. He just killed the idea.
Who
And it
did?
could be Burlington. Bernie did. Yeah, he killed it.
He did.
Yeah, yeah. We were all
What was,
set to go, and then
what
he
was
killed
his
it.
rationale?
Well, I don't think he ever fully explained his rationale. I suspect it it was because he realized that it would take a lot more work than just, printing an op-ed in the New York Times that we need a third party. And I mean, he must have figured the problems. And I would think that one thing that your show could do is to begin to compile the different experiences that candidates have had to see what the obstacles were.
Mhm.
Getting media attention is huge. There's a way
Right.
of overcoming that through YouTube and podcasts. They'll probably, they're already starting to crack down.
I
Trump
know
is
that.
hitting all over the place, right?
Mm,
So the new ways have to be found. But if you can't get the word out, it's hopeless, And then you have very conservative leaders, certainly in the Democratic Party, who don't want it to go to the left, for instance. They're going to fight it. And well, anyway, that's the scene. And ultimately, you got to get rid of Citizens United. There should be a total focus on getting rid of that, which has allowed so much corporate money to come in and fund these campaigns. And look at what Musk did, and put out all sorts of
right.
false information. I mean, we're in a bad place, and I can't predict where it's going, but people should look at it very seriously because now we have fascism to deal with.
Mm.
Yeah.
So Charlotte, I would like you back on focus on the candidates because and I I forgot the word. Uh
Privacy.
privacy. I
Yeah.
want to do a show with you on privacy, and I think people should understand what that's all about. So I would like you back on to talk about that.
Sure, I'll say what it is and then we can do it.
Okay.
Privacy means to publish a book privately so it syncs without a trace. Go through the contractual obligations, you put the book out, then you kill the book. That happens. A lot of people don't know it's happened to their books. No promotion, killing another print run, canceling the author's tour. So that's what happened to us.
Wow. Okay, so Charlotte, final words.
I'd like to say pray for us, even though I'm not religious. God. I don't know. I talked to somebody very high level in national security. All right. He says we're in a very, very serious time. So,
Mhm, mhm. You
yeah,
know, you and I are the same age, and prior to 1945, there were wars. And, as devastating as that was, there wasn't the threat of a nuclear bomb destroying everything like
yeah,
in 45 to the present. I think that's the line in the sand.
yep. It's very serious.
So, Charlotte, I look forward to having you back on again. You're
Sure.
listening to Charlotte Dennett. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on the Candidates. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Stay cool if you're on the East Coast.
Yeah. Thanks, Cynthia.
Bye.
I'll try.